The first time my mother erased me, it was at my own birthday dinner. I remember because the candle wax was still warm on my fingers when she lifted her glass and said, "To my son, the one who carries this family forward." Her eyes never met mine. They slid past me like I was part of the wallpaper. Decorative, replaceable. I was turning 30 that night. 30 years old, sitting at a long oak table in my parents' suburban Connecticut home, the same table where every holiday argument and forced smile had been staged since I was a child. My sister Lauren sat beside my mother, radiant in white, her engagement ring flashing under the chandelier. My younger brother Mark leaned back in his chair, already half drunk, scrolling his phone like none of this mattered. I smiled. I always smiled. That had been my role for as long as I could remember. What no one at that table knew was that I had already read the will. Not the version my parents thought existed. The real one. The one hidden in a safe behind my father's law office. The one that explained everything I had spent my life feeling but never had proof of. Favoritism, betrayal, exclusion written in careful legal language. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of the end for all of them. It started as these things always do, with something small. My mother cut the cake and handed the first slice to Lauren, then Mark, then my father. By the time she reached me, the plate was scraped thin, frosting smeared like an afterthought. "Oh," she said, blinking as if surprised to see me. "I didn't think you'd want any. You're always watching your weight." I wasn't. But I took the plate anyway and thanked her because gratitude had been trained into my spine. Lauren leaned over and whispered, "Don't be so sensitive," when she saw my expression. "It's just cake." She had been saying versions of that sentence my entire life. "Don't be so sensitive, don't take it personally. You know how Mom is. You know Dad means well." I did know, that was the problem. After dinner, while everyone moved into the living room for champagne and engagement photos, I slipped into the hallway and leaned against the wall, breathing through the tightness in my chest. The house smelled like pine cleaner and old money. My parents had lived there for decades, a quiet mansion tucked behind iron gates, paid for by my father's construction company and protected by my mother's belief that appearances were everything. I had helped build that company. No one ever mentioned that part. From age 19, I worked summers on job sites, doing the books, managing vendors, catching errors that would have cost us millions. When my father had his heart scare in his early 50s, I stepped in full-time while Lauren went to Europe and Mark dropped out of business school for the third time. I didn't complain. I told myself loyalty would be rewarded eventually. It never was. That night, my father cornered me near the staircase. He had that familiar tight smile, the one he used when he wanted something without acknowledging the debt. "Lauren's wedding is going to be expensive," he said. "We'll need you to handle some things. Contracts, vendor negotiations, the boring stuff." "Of course you will," I thought. Out loud I said, "Sure." He nodded, satisfied, already turning away. Good girl. I was 30 years old, running half his company behind the scenes, and he still spoke to me like a child who should be grateful for crumbs. I went home that night with a headache and a heaviness that sleep couldn't touch. My apartment was small, clean, quiet. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my phone at the unread message from Evan, my fiancé, asking how dinner went. I typed fine and deleted it. Typed same as always and deleted it. Finally sent long. "I'll call tomorrow." Evan had his own opinions about my family. He called them polished poison. I told him he didn't understand. Part of me knew he did. 3 days later, everything cracked. My father called me into his office earlier than usual. The blinds were closed. His assistant wouldn't meet my eyes. I felt it in my gut before he said a word. "Sit down," he said. I did. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were copies of company documents I had prepared months earlier, annotated in red ink, my work, my signatures, "There's been a concern raised," he said carefully, "about conflict of interest." I frowned. "What conflict?" He cleared his throat. "It's been suggested that your position here could complicate future plans, succession planning." The words were polite, the meaning wasn't. "You're being pushed out," he said finally. "It's cleaner this way. Lauren will be stepping into an executive role after the wedding, Mark too eventually." I stared at him, my ears ringing. "I run operations. Neither of them has experience." He didn't argue that point. That hurt more than if he had. "You'll be taken care of," he added quickly. "There's a severance, a generous one." I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that surprised us both. "You're firing me." "We're restructuring," he said. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not snapped, shifted, like a door finally opening. I stood smoothing my skirt. I want to review the will. His face changed. Just for a second, fear quickly masked. That's not necessary, he said. Yes, I replied. It is. I left his office with my hands shaking, but my spine straight. That afternoon, I called the one person in my family who had ever looked at me like I mattered. My grandmother. She was 90 sharp as broken glass and very hard of hearing. When I told her what happened, there was a long pause on the line. So she said finally, "They're doing it now." Doing what? She exhaled slowly. "Come see me." I drove to her house as the sun set, my mind racing. She lived alone in a modest place, far from my parents' mansion by choice. When she opened the door, she didn't hug me. She studied my face like she was confirming something she'd known all along. "They never forgave you," she said, turning away. "For being capable." She led me into her study and opened a drawer I had never seen before. Inside was a key and a folded document yellowed at the edges. "Your grandfather changed his will before he died," she said. "Your father never told you." My hands trembled as I unfolded it. My name was there, not as a footnote, not as an afterthought. As the primary beneficiary. That was when I understood. I had never been invisible. I had been inconvenient. And they were about to learn exactly what happens when you underestimate the woman who kept the lights on while you were busy admiring yourself. I didn't know how yet, I didn't know when. But as I drove home that night, the city lights blurring through my tears, one thought settled in my chest, heavy and certain. They thought they'd excluded me. They had no idea they'd just given me everything I needed to take it all back. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that only comes after a lifetime of swallowing anger. My grandmother's words echoed in my head as I stood in the shower, steam fogging the mirror. "They never forgave you for being capable." I'd always assumed I was imagining the imbalance, that I was too sensitive, too observant, too hungry for approval. But now I knew better. This wasn't neglect. It was strategy. I went into work anyway. Habit is a powerful leash. The office smelled like coffee and printer toner, the familiar hum of a place I had practically raised. People nodded as I passed, some warmly, some with that tight politeness that signals news has already traveled faster than truth. By the time I reached my desk, an envelope waited there, cream-colored, thick, formal. Human Resources. I didn't open it right away. I logged into my computer instead and started pulling files. Contracts I had negotiated, vendor agreements, emails approving decisions my father now pretended he barely remembered. Years of invisible labor documented and time-stamped. At 10 sharp, Lauren swept into the office like a bride entering a chapel. She wore a pale blue dress, expensive and impractical, her hair curled just enough to look effortless. She didn't knock. She never did. So she said, perching on the corner of my desk, "Dad told you." "Told me what I asked," not looking up. She laughed softly. "Don't play dumb. This is for the best. You were always more comfortable in the background." I finally met her eyes. They were bright with something close to relief. "You mean useful," I said. Her smile faltered. "Just a hair. You've always had such a chip on your shoulder." I stood slow and deliberate. "You're stepping into a role you don't understand. The vendors trust me. The subcontractors answer my calls. You'll burn through goodwill in a month." She waved a manicured hand. "That's why we're keeping you on through the wedding. Transitional support." There it was, the hook. For how long, I asked. She tilted her head. "Through Christmas." Christmas. The word landed like a slap. Every Christmas of my life had been some variation of performance. Lauren center stage, Mark making a mess, me cleaning it up and pretending it didn't hurt. "I see," I said. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Between us, you should be grateful. Most people don't get this kind of exit package." Between us, as if we had ever been on the same side. After she left, I opened the envelope. Severance, non-disclosure, non-compete. A clean erasure wrapped in legal courtesy. They wanted my silence, my compliance, my obedience one last time. I signed nothing. Instead, I drove straight to my grandmother's house again. She was waiting, tea already poured. "You look like someone who finally believes herself," she said. I showed her the papers. She skimmed them unimpressed. "They think money is leverage." "It usually is," I said. She studied me over the rim of her cup. "What do you want?" The question startled me. Not what do you need? Not what do you deserve? What do you want? "I want them to feel it," I said quietly. "The way I did. I want them to know what it's like to be cut out of a story they thought they owned." She nodded once, Then you'll need patience and precision. She handed me another folder, this one heavier. Your grandfather didn't just change the will, she said. He changed ownership structures. Quietly, through trusts, shell entities. He never trusted your father's judgment. My breath caught as I flipped through the pages. Property deeds, shares, voting rights, all contingent on conditions that had already been met. He left you a choice, she said. You can claim it publicly now or wait. Wait for what? For them to hang themselves. I went home that night with a plan forming slow and careful. Evan noticed immediately. You're different, he said as we sat on the couch, his hand warm on my knee. What happened? I told him everything. The will, the firing, the wedding. He listened without interrupting, jaw tightening with every sentence. They don't know who they're dealing with, he said finally. No, I replied. They think they do. The next weeks became a strange dance. By day, I played the role they expected. Transitional support, helpful daughter, calm sister. I trained Lauren on systems she barely paid attention to, documented processes she'd never read, answered frantic calls when things went wrong. She thanked me with forced smiles and passive-aggressive compliments. By night, I worked. I met with a lawyer my grandmother trusted. Quiet, ruthless. The kind of woman who didn't blink when I said the word revenge but reframed it as restitution. We reviewed every clause, every contingency, every lever available to me. You don't need to expose them, the lawyer said. You just need to step out of the way and let their habits do the rest. The first crack appeared at Thanksgiving. Lauren insisted on hosting, eager to prove her new authority. She over-invited, under-planned. Vendors showed up late. Food ran cold. A key donor to the company waited an hour for a promised introduction that never happened. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Lauren floundered, smiles stretched thin wine glass refilled too often. My mother hovered, whispering corrections. My father looked pale. At dinner, Mark made a joke about me being between jobs. Everyone laughed. I raised my glass. Actually, I said lightly, I've been consulting. Lauren shot me a warning look. For who, my mother asked. I smiled. For myself. Silence rippled down the table. That night, Evan squeezed my hand under the table. You're enjoying this, he murmured. No, I said truthfully. I'm preparing them. Christmas was 3 weeks away. The wedding planning was in chaos. The company was wobbling, and the will sat quietly in my grandmother's safe, waiting for the right moment. They thought they'd sidelined me. They had no idea I was about to step into the only role that ever really mattered, the one where I stopped cleaning up their messes and started letting them drown in them. By December, the house was already cracking under the weight of pretending. My mother called it holiday stress. My father blamed the market. Lauren blamed everyone except herself. And Mark, as always, blamed the alcohol he hadn't yet stopped drinking. I blamed timing. Because timing, I was learning, was everything. The week after Thanksgiving, Lauren summoned me to her new corner office. She'd redecorated immediately as if space alone could transfer authority. Fresh paint, new furniture, a framed engagement photo on the desk angled so anyone entering would be forced to admire it. She didn't offer me a chair. I need you to stay through the wedding, she said, arms crossed. Not just Christmas. The transition is harder than expected. I waited. The board is nervous, she continued. Vendors keep asking for you. Dad says morale will stabilize once things settle. There it was, the unspoken truth. I was the glue. Remove me too fast and the cracks showed. And what do I get? I asked calmly. Her eyes flicked away for a second. We already discussed compensation. No, I said. We discussed severance. This is different. She exhaled sharply. You're being difficult. I smiled, slow and polite. You're being dependent. The word landed harder than I expected. She stiffened. Fine, she said. Name it. I leaned forward. I want access. Access to what? Everything, I said. Full financials, contracts, trust structures, no filters. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Absolutely not. Then no, I replied, standing. I'm done at Christmas. Her face flushed. You can't do this. You owe this family. I paused at the door. I already paid. That night, my father called. His voice was tight, controlled the way it always was when he was angry, but afraid to show it. Lauren says you're making demands. I'm making boundaries, I said. You're being emotional. There it was again, the word they used to dismiss, minimize, erase. I'm being precise, I corrected. He sighed. What do you want? I thought of my grandmother's steady gaze, of the will locked away, of the leverage they didn't know existed. I want transparency, I said, or I walk. Silence stretched, then reluctantly fine. The access came 2 days later. It arrived quietly through shared drives and forwarded passwords wrapped in the arrogance of people who believed no one would look closely. They underestimated me the way they always had. I didn't just look, I dissected. At night, after Evan fell asleep beside me, I sat at my kitchen table with spreadsheets spread across the screen, a mug of cold coffee forgotten at my elbow. I followed money trails the way other people followed recipes. Patterns emerged fast when you knew where to look. Deferred payments, inflated invoices, quiet loans moved through subsidiaries I recognized from my grandfather's notes. Not illegal, not yet, but careless. And carelessness was exploitable. The biggest surprise wasn't Lauren, it was my mother. Her name appeared again and again on documents she claimed not to understand. Trust amendments, property transfers, decisions made under the guise of estate planning. She wasn't just complicit, she was orchestrating. The realization sat heavy in my chest. My mother, the woman who taught me how to bake bread and fold napkins, just so, had also taught herself how to erase me cleanly. I drove to my grandmother's house that weekend, the snow thick on the roads, my mind louder than the engine. "She knows," I said as soon as I sat down. My grandmother nodded, she always has. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked tired then, older than I'd ever seen her. "Because you needed to see it yourself, otherwise you'd always doubt." I swallowed hard. They were planning to cut me out completely. "They already did," she said gently. "You're just the last to know." Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in forced cheer. The house was transformed into a winter postcard. Garland on the staircase, candles everywhere, music humming just loud enough to drown out discomfort. Lauren floated through the rooms like a hostess auditioning for approval, correcting details no one noticed. I arrived with Evan, a deliberate choice. He was my witness, my anchor. My mother greeted us with a kiss on the cheek that didn't reach her eyes. "You look tired," she said. I smiled. "So do you." Dinner was tense, conversations clipped, laughter sharp. Mark drank too fast. Lauren snapped at the caterer. My father watched it all with the detached expression of a man losing control of a machine he once mastered. At dessert, my mother cleared her throat. "We have an announcement." Lauren beamed. My father stiffened. "We've decided." My mother continued to move forward with some estate planning adjustments before the wedding. My pulse slowed. This was it. Given the future of the family business, she said, "We think it's best to simplify." Simplify, such a clean word for erasure. She turned to me. "We'll make sure you're provided for." I set my fork down carefully. "I won't need that," I said. Silence fell like snow. Lauren stared. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said evenly, "that I've already made arrangements." My father's eyes narrowed. "What arrangements?" I met his gaze, legal ones. My grandmother's will sat between us like a ghost none of them could see. I think I added we should all take a breath, enjoy Christmas. Evan squeezed my hand under the table. Later that night, Lauren cornered me by the tree, her voice low and sharp. "What are you doing?" "Waiting," I replied. "For what?" "For you to make your next mistake." Her laugh was brittle. "You think you're smarter than us." "No," I said softly, "I know you think I'm not." As Evan and I left snow crunching under our feet, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Certainty. They were moving pieces on a board they didn't realize I owned. And the next move was already in motion. The first real mistake Lauren made was assuming silence meant surrender. The week after Christmas, the office felt different. Not quieter, tenser, like a room where everyone knows a secret but no one agrees on what it is. Emails went unanswered. Meetings ran long and accomplished nothing. Vendors started copying me on messages meant for Lauren, the professional equivalent of glancing toward the adult in the room. I didn't correct them. Lauren noticed. She called an emergency leadership meeting on a Tuesday morning, the kind that announces panic without saying the word. My father sat stiffly at the head of the table. My mother wasn't there, claiming a migraine that had a way of appearing whenever accountability entered the room. Mark slouched in his chair, bored and resentful. Lauren cleared her throat. "We need alignment," she said. "There's been confusion about roles." I waited. "There's also been," she continued, eyes flicking toward me, "some off-channel communication that's undermining authority." There it was. I was the problem again. "I agree," I said calmly. "Clarity helps." She blinked. "Good. Then you'll support the new reporting structure." "I will," I said, "until my departure date." My father shifted. "About that," he began. "No," I interrupted gently. "About transparency." The room went still. "I've reviewed the financials," I continued, my voice steady. "There are discrepancies that need explaining." Lauren's jaw tightened. "We've been over this. No, I said, we haven't. I slid a printed sheet across the table. 1 page. Simple. Clean. A summary of deferred liabilities tied to a subsidiary Mark technically oversaw but never actually managed. Mark looked up. What's that? Your mess, I said. Lauren laughed, sharp and dismissive. This is internal. Why are you bringing it here? Because I replied the board asked me to. My father's head snapped toward me. The board did not ask you to. They did, I said, yesterday afternoon. Silence. Thick. Dangerous. Lauren's confidence wavered for the first time. Why would they go to you? I met her eyes, because they trust results. After the meeting, she followed me into the hallway, heels clicking too fast. You went behind my back. I walked through the door you left open, I said. You're trying to embarrass me. No, I replied, I'm trying to protect the company. She laughed, but it sounded close to hysteria. You don't care about the company. I stopped walking, turned. I built half of it, I said quietly. You inherited the rest. She stared at me like she'd never really looked before. You think this ends well for you? I thought of my grandmother's will, of the quiet power waiting. Yes, I said, I do. That night, Evan made dinner while I sat at the table staring at my phone. Messages poured in, questions from board members, concern from vendors, confusion from employees. Lauren was unraveling faster than I expected. You okay? Evan asked, setting a plate in front of me. I think so, I said. I just didn't realize how much they relied on me pretending not to see. He sat across from me. What's the endgame? I hesitated. Truth. He nodded, and after that, I smiled faintly. Justice. The next mistake came from my mother. She invited me to lunch, just the two of us, at a quiet restaurant she liked to use for difficult conversations. She arrived early, already seated, hands folded, posture perfect. You've made things complicated, she said instead of hello. So have you, I replied, sitting. She sighed. We did what we had to. For who, I asked. For the family. I leaned back. You mean Lauren? Her eyes flashed. Lauren needs stability. And I didn't, I asked softly. She looked away. You're strong. You always have been. There it was, the compliment that excused cruelty. You rewrote the estate, I said. Her lips pressed together. We adjusted it. You erased me, I corrected. She met my gaze, then something hard and cold behind her eyes. You were never meant to lead. The words landed with surprising calm, not pain, not shock. Confirmation. I see, I said. She reached across the table. We can fix this quietly. I withdrew my hand. No. Her voice sharpened. If you push this, you'll destroy everything. I smiled, sad and steady. You already did. That afternoon, I went to my grandmother's house again. She listened as I told her everything, nodding unsurprised. It's time, she said. For what? For you to stop waiting. She opened the safe. Inside, the will lay heavy and real. She placed it in my hands like a blessing and a burden. File it, she said, before the wedding. I exhaled. They'll never forgive me. She smiled thinly. They never did. The filing happened quietly through my lawyer, the way real power moves. No announcements, no threats. Just paperwork sliding into the right offices at the right time. 3 days later, my father called me, his voice shaking with something close to panic. What did you do? He demanded. I told the truth, I said. There's been a notice, he said, about ownership. Yes, you can't do this. I already did. The wedding was 2 weeks away. The company was teetering. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was watching it approach. The first crack went public on a Monday morning. I was at my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside my laptop, when Evan looked up from his phone and said, Your family's company is trending. I didn't ask why. I already knew. The headline wasn't explosive. It never is at first. It was cautious, almost polite. Questions raised about ownership structure at long-standing family firm. That was all it took. By the time I reached the office, the lobby was buzzing, in that restrained, professional way people use when they're afraid of saying the wrong thing out loud. Phones rang and stopped ringing. People whispered, then pretended they weren't. Lauren was already pacing outside the conference room when she saw me. You did this, she hissed, grabbing my arm hard enough to hurt. I looked down at her hand, then back up at her face. Let go. She didn't. My father appeared behind her face, gray eyes bloodshot. Inside now. The conference room door closed with a soft click that sounded final. What did you file? Lauren demanded. The will, I said. My mother's name flickered across my father's phone screen. He silenced it without answering. You had no right, Lauren said, her voice rising. That was private. So was my career, I replied. So was my place in this family. Mark laughed from this corner, a sharp, unpleasant sound. You're really doing this? You think a piece of paper makes you important? I turned to him. It makes me visible. My father rubbed his temples. You don't understand what you've started. I understand exactly, I said. You built a company on trust and reputation. You just forgot who earned it. Lauren slammed her hand on the table. This will ruin the wedding. The words hung there absurd and revealing. That's what you're worried about, I asked quietly. She stared at me, eyes bright with something close to panic. You've always hated that I'm happy. I almost laughed. I don't hate your happiness, I said. I hate that mine was never allowed. The board meeting was called that afternoon. Not by Lauren, not by my father. By the chairman. I took my seat at the long table, the same seat I'd occupied for years without title or recognition. This time, no one ignored me. No one looked past me. They looked at me like they were finally seeing the full picture. The chairman cleared his throat. We've reviewed the filing. Lauren spoke first. This is a misunderstanding. It's not, he replied. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. The ownership transfer is valid, the chairman continued, and effective immediately. Lauren's breath hitched. Effective immediately. Yes. The word landed like a gavel. What does that mean? Mark asked. I answered him. It means the company no longer belongs to the people who treated it like a toy. Silence. The chairman folded his hands. We'll need interim leadership while this is sorted. Lauren looked at my father. My father looked at the table. Then slowly the chairman turned to me. Would you be willing to step in? Lauren laughed loud and brittle. You can't be serious. I am, he said. I didn't smile, I didn't celebrate, I nodded. Yes, I said, I would. After the meeting, Lauren followed me into the stairwell, her composure finally gone. You planned this, she said, voice breaking. You waited until everything mattered. I waited until it was necessary, I replied. You're punishing us. No, I said, I'm stopping the bleeding. She slid down onto the steps, mascara streaking. You don't understand what they'll say about me. I paused, looked at her. They already did, I said gently. You just weren't listening. That night, my mother came to my apartment unannounced. She stood in the doorway, coat still on, eyes sharp and furious. You humiliated us. I stepped aside to let her in. Sit down. I won't, she snapped. You think this makes you righteous? I think it makes me honest. She scoffed. You've always needed to be the martyr. I folded my arms. You needed me quiet. She stared at me, really stared, as if searching for the obedient daughter she raised. You're tearing this family apart, she said. I shook my head. I'm showing you where it was already broken. Her voice dropped. If you go through with this, don't expect forgiveness. I met her gaze. I never had it. She left without another word. The fallout was immediate. Lauren's wedding planner quit. Vendors demanded new contracts. Guests started asking questions no one wanted to answer. The glossy image cracked under the weight of reality. Evan watched it all with quiet awe. You're calm, he said one night. I'm tired, I replied, but I'm done being afraid. The night before the wedding, my grandmother called. You ready? She asked. I looked out the window at the city lights, steady and indifferent. Yes, I said. Good, she replied. Tomorrow they'll learn the difference between inheritance and legacy. I slept better than I had in years. Because for the first time, the story wasn't being written about me without my consent. Tomorrow I would attend the wedding, not as the overlooked daughter, but as the woman who owned the truth they tried to bury. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter light that makes everything look honest, whether you want it to or not. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror longer than usual, adjusting my coat, studying the woman looking back at me. I looked the same technically. Same dark hair pulled back, same quiet posture. But something fundamental had shifted behind my eyes. I wasn't bracing anymore. I wasn't shrinking in anticipation of someone else's comfort. Evan watched from the doorway. You don't have to go, he said gently. Yes, I replied, I do. The venue was a restored estate an hour outside the city, all white stone and manicured hedges, the kind of place designed to photograph well from every angle. As we pulled into the drive, I saw black SUVs lined up, florists, rushing staff whispering urgently into headsets. Something was already wrong. When I stepped out of the car, the conversations around us stuttered. People recognized me now. Not as Lauren's sister, not as background. As the problem. As the answer. Inside, the air buzzed with panic dressed in perfume. Lauren's friends huddled near the bar whispering. Her future in-laws stood stiff and confused, glancing at their phones. My mother paced near the entrance, her smile, brittle eyes scanning the room. She saw me and froze. For a moment I thought she might turn away. Instead, she walked toward me, each step controlled, deliberate. You came, she said. You invited me, I replied. Her jaw tightened. This isn't the time. When is? I asked. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. People are talking. You've made enough of a spectacle. I smiled faintly. I didn't invite the truth, it arrived on its own. She straightened eyes cold. If you ruin this for her. I cut her off. She ruined it herself. Before she could respond, Lauren appeared at the top of the staircase. She was stunning. I could admit that. The dress fit her perfectly, tailored and expensive, the kind of gown magazines drool over. But her face was wrong. Pale, tight. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for an exit that didn't exist. When she saw me, something in her expression collapsed. She descended the stairs quickly, too quickly, gathering her skirt and shaking hands. You're really here, she said, breathless. Yes. You promised, she whispered. You said you'd wait. I said I'd be quiet, I replied, not invisible. Her voice broke. Do you know what this is doing to me? I studied her, really studied her, and saw it for the first time. Fear, not embarrassment, not anger. Fear. They're asking questions, she said. His parents, the guests, the board. I nodded. They should. She grabbed my arm again, harder this time. Fix this. The old reflex, flared muscle memory urging me to soothe, smooth sacrifice. For half a second I felt it. Then it passed. No, I said. Her nails dug in. You owe me. I met her gaze. I don't owe you my silence. A coordinator appeared, flushed and frantic. We need to delay, she whispered to Lauren. The officiant hasn't arrived. Lauren laughed high and sharp. Of course he hasn't. The truth broke through minutes later. The officiant had backed out. So had the photographer. So had 3 vendors who had been quietly informed of pending ownership changes and decided they didn't want to be caught in the fallout. Lauren's fiancé stood near the window phone pressed to his ear, his expression darkening by the second. When he hung up, he looked at Lauren like he was seeing her for the first time. What's going on? He asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at me instead. I said nothing. He turned to my father. You told us everything was settled. My father looked small in that moment, old. It will be. When the man demanded. No one answered. The guests murmured. Phones glowed. Whispers spread like heat through dry grass. Finally, the chairman of the board arrived. Not invited, not expected. He walked in calmly, impeccably dressed, and the room shifted around him. Conversations died. Eyes followed. He stopped in front of Lauren. This is inappropriate, she snapped. So is fraud, he replied mildly. My mother gasped. He turned to the room. I apologize for the interruption, but there are matters that can't wait. Lauren's voice rose shrill. This is my wedding! And this, he said evenly, is a business built on trust. He looked at me then, just for a second, a silent acknowledgement. I'm afraid, he continued, that certain announcements will need to be postponed. The room erupted. Lauren screamed. My mother sobbed. Mark swore loudly. Guests stared stunned. The fiancé stepped back from Lauren, his face hard. You told me this was over. She reached for him. It is. It will be. He shook his head. I can't do this. The words were quiet, but they cut deeper than any shout. He handed her the ring. The sound it made hitting the floor was small, but the silence afterward was enormous. I stood there, heart pounding, not with joy, not with cruelty, but with a strange, heavy grief. Not for the wedding, for the illusion, for the years wasted trying to earn love that had conditions attached. Lauren sank to the floor, sobbing. My mother rushed to her. My father stood frozen. No one looked at me. I didn't need them to. Evan took my hand, ready. I nodded. As we walked out past the flowers and the broken ceremony, I felt lighter than I had in decades. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped losing myself to keep them comfortable. Behind us, the estate echoed with chaos. Ahead of us, the road was quiet. And for the first time, that quiet felt like freedom. The morning after the wedding that never happened, the world woke up hungry. My phone started buzzing before dawn. Missed calls, messages, voicemails stacked like falling dominoes. People who had never known my name suddenly knew it very well. People who had always known it now pretended they hadn't. I let it ring. Evan made coffee while I stood by the window watching the city stretch awake, gray and indifferent. You don't look surprised, he said. I'm not, I replied. This is what happens when truth loses its patience. By 8 o'clock, the story was everywhere. Family business heir removed as ownership dispute explodes wedding plans. They tried to make it sound neutral. They failed. Lauren's face was on every screen, mascara-streaked, ringless, framed by captions that used words like collapse, implosion, and betrayal. My father appeared in grainy footage, refusing comment. My mother didn't appear at all. And me, I was mentioned once, buried. A previously overlooked family member. I smiled at that. The board meeting that morning was efficient. brutal, necessary. Lauren wasn't there. My father attended remotely, his voice thin and distant. The chairman wasted no time. "We'll be issuing a public statement," he said. "Effective immediately, you'll assume full operational control." I nodded. "No interviews," he added. "Let the facts speak." Facts had always been my language. By noon, Lauren called. I watched her name light up my phone for a long moment before answering. "What do you want?" she demanded, skipping pleasantries. "To know how you're enjoying the mess you made," I replied calmly. "You destroyed my life," she said, her voice raw. He left. My friends won't answer. I can't even go outside. I closed my eyes. Welcome to being invisible. Silence stretched between us, heavy and unfamiliar. "You planned this," she said finally. "You always hated me." I laughed softly, a sound that surprised us both. "I didn't hate you. I hated who I had to become to survive you." She sniffed. "You think you're better than me now." "No," I said, "I think I'm done." She hung up. That afternoon, my mother showed up again. She looked smaller than I remembered, coat hanging, loose hair unstyled. The woman who once commanded rooms now hovered in my doorway like she wasn't sure she belonged. "I raised you," she said, voice trembling. "I fed you, clothed you, and this is how you repay me." I stepped aside to let her in. "Sit." She did slowly, like sitting might break her. "You taught me," I said gently. "You taught me exactly how power works in this family." She shook her head. "You've humiliated us." "No," I replied. "I stopped protecting you." Tears filled her eyes. "Your father is unwell." That old hook tugged at me. Guilt, responsibility, fear. I breathed through it. "Then he should rest," I said, "not rule." She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You've always been cold," she whispered. I smiled sadly. "I learned from you." She left without another word. That night, I drove to my grandmother's house. She opened the door and studied my face, nodding once. It started. "It's ugly," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "Justice usually is at first." We sat in her kitchen, the same place where secrets had been stored and plans quietly shaped. She poured tea with steady hands. "Lauren will come for you," she said. "Not with tears, with lies." "I know. And your mother will try to turn the family against you." I almost laughed. "There isn't much family left to turn." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've done well." The words settled in my chest, warm and solid. Approval without conditions. That night I slept deeply for the first time since childhood. The next blow came from an unexpected place. Mark. He showed up at my office unannounced, eyes bloodshot, suit wrinkled. "You didn't have to do this," he said, slumping into a chair. "I did," I replied. "They're talking about criminal investigations," he whispered. "About audits." I watched him carefully. "Did you do something illegal?" He laughed hollow. "We all did something." There it was. "You should talk to a lawyer," I said. He looked at me, truly looked at me, and for the first time there was fear without arrogance. "Are you going to protect us?" I shook my head. "I'm going to protect the truth." He stood slowly. "Then we're done." "We were done a long time ago," I replied. That evening, Evan and I walked along the river, the city lights reflecting off the dark water. "Do you regret it?" he asked. I thought of the wedding, the silence, the look on Lauren's face when the illusion shattered. "No," I said. "I regret waiting so long." My phone buzzed again. A message from the chairman. "Media inquiries increasing. Prepare." I exhaled. The next phase was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be quiet. The first interview request came disguised as concern. A producer left a voicemail praising my bravery and asking if I wanted to share my side. I deleted it. The second came from a business journal offering a profile about women in leadership under pressure. I ignored that too. By the third, the language sharpened. Allegations, questions, a deadline. That was when I knew Lauren had stopped crying and started plotting. I sat in my office with the blinds half open, sunlight cutting a clean line across the table. The company felt different now, quieter, more focused. People walked with purpose instead of fear. That told me everything I needed to know about who had been the problem. Evan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "They're circling." "I expected them to," I said. "Predators don't starve quietly." My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You think you've won. You haven't." "Lauren." I stared at the words for a long moment, then set the phone face down. Winning had never been the point. Survival had. And now, accountability. The smear campaign launched that afternoon. Anonymous sources claimed I had manipulated my grandmother, that I'd coerced her into changing documents, that I was emotionally unstable, vindictive, driven by jealousy. Old phrases dusted off and repackaged for public consumption. I watched it unfold without flinching. Because while Lauren had spin, I had records. By evening, the board's legal counsel was in my office, calm and direct. "We're advising a full internal audit," she said. "Voluntary, transparent." I nodded. "Do it." She hesitated. "This will expose a lot." "Good," I said. "Sunlight works." That night, my grandmother called. "They've contacted me," she said. My chest tightened. "Are you all right?" "I am," she replied calmly. I told them the truth. "Which is that I made my choices with a clear mind," she said. "And that if anyone pressured me, it was your mother." I closed my eyes. "Good," I said quietly. The next morning, the audit began. Emails surfaced, approvals traced, decisions mapped. Patterns emerged that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with years of quiet entitlement. Mark's name appeared often, Lauren's more so. My mother's in places no one expected. The press pivoted fast, from jealous sister to hidden architect, from family drama to corporate rot. Lauren went silent. 2 days later, she broke it. She called a press conference. I watched it live from my office volume, low hands steady. She stood at a podium flanked by an attorney and a publicist, her expression carefully composed. "My sister has always struggled with resentment," she began. "This is a tragic misunderstanding fueled by personal vendetta." I almost admired the audacity. Then she made the mistake. She mentioned a document that hadn't been made public yet. Specifics, dates, amounts. The attorney beside her stiffened. The publicist's smile froze. I leaned back in my chair. "That's perjury," Evan murmured. "Yes," I said, and panic. Within hours, the story shifted again. Questions about insider knowledge, about obstruction, about whether Lauren had accessed materials she wasn't authorized to see. The board issued a statement distancing the company from any individual actions taken outside governance. My father finally spoke, not to the press, to me. He called late, his voice hollow. "You've destroyed us." I listened. "You could have stopped," he continued. "You could have chosen peace." I answered softly. "Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of truth." He laughed bitterly. "You sound like your grandmother." I smiled. She raised me. There was a pause. Then quietly, "Your mother is ill." The words landed heavy. I closed my eyes. "What kind of ill?" He hesitated. "Stress. Doctors say." "I'll visit," I said, "but I won't lie." He didn't respond. I went to see my mother the next day. She lay in a room that smelled like antiseptic and regret, eyes closed, face drawn. When she saw me, her expression hardened. "You've come to gloat," she said. "No," I replied, sitting. "I came to end this." She scoffed. "You've always been dramatic." I met her gaze. "You taught me how." Her eyes flicked away. "Lauren is fragile." "So was I said. "You just didn't care." Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and angry. "You've taken everything." I shook my head. "I took responsibility. You gave up decency." She turned her face to the wall. When I left the hospital, the sky was heavy with clouds, the air thick with coming rain. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed deeply, letting the weight move through me instead of settling. The audit concluded that week. Findings were released. Contracts misused, funds diverted, oversight ignored. Not criminal, not all of it, but enough to stain reputations permanently. Lauren resigned. Mark disappeared. My mother retreated from public life entirely. The board offered me a permanent appointment. I accepted. Not as revenge, as correction. That night, Evan and I toasted quietly in our kitchen. "To truth," he said. "To endurance," I replied. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Lauren. "I hope you're happy." I typed back slowly. "I'm honest." Then I turned the phone off. Because the story wasn't about them anymore. It was about what comes after the fire. And for the first time, I was ready to build the silence after the storm was louder than the chaos that came before it. For weeks, my life had been a barrage of voices, accusations, justifications, and explanations. Now suddenly, there was room to think, to feel, to notice how my hands no longer shook when my phone rang, how my shoulders sat lower, lighter, how sleep came without rehearsing conversations I would never have. The company settled into a new rhythm under my leadership. Not perfect, not easy, but honest. Meetings were shorter, decisions clearer. People spoke without glancing over their shoulders. It amazed me how quickly fear evaporated when it was no longer rewarded. But peace has a way of inviting ghosts. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a call. A physical envelope slipped under my office door, the paper thick, expensive, familiar, in a way that made my chest tighten before I even opened it. My mother's handwriting. I didn't read it right away. I set it on my desk and stared at it through the rest of the afternoon, through 3 meetings and a working lunch, through a conversation with legal about restructuring a department Mark had neglected for years. The envelope waited patiently, like it knew I would come to it when I was ready. That evening, alone in my office, I opened it. She wrote about regret without using the word, about loneliness disguised as dignity, about how quiet the house had become since Lauren stopped calling and Mark vanished into whatever corner of the world he'd chosen to hide in. She wrote about illness, about time feeling shorter, about wishing she'd done things differently. She did not apologize. At the end, one sentence stood alone. I hope one day you understand why I did what I did. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Understanding, I had learned, was not the same as absolution. A few days later, the call came that I'd been expecting but still wasn't ready for. Lauren. Her voice sounded different. Lower. Thinner. The sharp confidence I'd grown up with had dulled, worn down by consequences she could no longer talk her way out of. I'm leaving, she said without preamble. Where, I asked. California. A friend offered me a place to stay. For a while. I waited. They asked me to sign a statement, she continued. About the audit. About the decisions. Did you? I asked. Yes. There it was. The last thread severing itself. I didn't lie, she added quickly. I just told my version. I almost smiled. Of course she did. Why are you telling me this? I asked. There was a pause. Then quietly. Because I don't know who I am without all of this. And I think you do. The admission surprised me more than any accusation ever had. I know who I am now, I said carefully. It took me a long time. She swallowed. I could hear it. Do you ever miss us? I thought of childhood summers. Of whispered jokes under blankets. Of the moment everything shifted and competition replaced affection. I miss who we could have been, I said. Not who we chose to become. She exhaled a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. That sounds like something Grandma would say. Yes, I replied. It does. She didn't say goodbye when she hung up. Neither did I. The holidays came quietly that year. No invitations, no forced gatherings, no performances disguised as tradition. Evan and I hosted a small dinner for friends who had stood by me through the worst of it. People who knew the story not as gossip, but as lived truth. As I watched them laugh around my table, I realized something profound. Family is not who demands your loyalty, it is who protects your dignity. My grandmother came, of course. She arrived with a small box wrapped in plain paper, and that knowing smile she wore when she believed she was witnessing something important. I wanted you to have this now, she said, handing it to me. Inside was a ring I'd never seen before. Simple, gold, unadorned. It belonged to my mother, she said. She wore it when she left a marriage that nearly destroyed her. I closed my fingers around it, emotions swelling unexpectedly. Why give it to me? Because you didn't just leave, she said. You rebuilt. That night, after everyone left, and the dishes were stacked in the sink, I stood by the window and watched the city glow. Evan wrapped his arms around me from behind. You okay? He asked. Yes, I said, surprised by how true it felt. The next morning, I received confirmation of something that would have thrilled my father and terrified my mother. A competitor wanted to merge, on my terms. Not because of the name, not because of legacy, because of leadership. As I signed the preliminary agreement, I felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. That afternoon, I visited my mother again. She looked smaller, paler, but her eyes still held that familiar sharpness. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Hope, maybe, or fear. I read your letter, I said. She nodded, and I understand why you did what you did, I said slowly. I just don't accept it. Her mouth tightened. So that's it. No, I replied gently. I stood. I will take care of you. I will make sure you're safe. But I will not make myself small to ease your guilt. Tears slipped down her face, then real ones this time. I wanted you to be strong, she whispered. I am, I said. That's what scared you. When I left the hospital, the air felt cold and clean, like something had finally been released. That night, as I lay beside Evan, sleep came easily. Not because everything was fixed, but because nothing was hidden anymore, and that I was learning was the beginning of real peace. Power settles differently when it's earned instead of borrowed. I felt it in the weeks that followed, not as adrenaline or triumph, but as a steady weight in my chest. Responsibility, choice, consequence. The company moved forward, but it didn't forget. Neither did I. The merger talks advanced quickly, efficient and clean. No grandstanding, No inflated promises. Just numbers, values, and a shared understanding that shortcuts always come due. I led every meeting myself, not to prove anything, but because I finally could. One afternoon, after a long session with legal and finance, I returned to my office to find a familiar figure waiting outside the door. Mark. He looked older than I remembered, though he was younger than me. The kind of older that comes from realizing the world won't cushion your fall. His suit was cheap, his confidence gone. "You got a minute?" he asked. I studied him. "You have 5. He followed me in and stood awkwardly like a teenager called into the principal's office. "I messed up," he said. "Yes," I replied. He winced. "I'm not asking you to fix it." Good, I thought. That would have ended the conversation. I need a job," he continued. "Anywhere. I burned everything else." I leaned back in my chair. "You don't want a job. You want absolution." He swallowed. "Maybe." I shook my head. "I can't give you that." His shoulders slumped, I figured. "But I added, I can give you honesty." He looked up. "You don't work here," I said. "Not now, not ever. Too much history, too many shortcuts." His face fell, but I wasn't finished. "I will, however, connect you with a firm that does hard work for little praise. You'll start low. You'll earn your way up. Or you'll quit." He nodded slowly. "That's fair." "It's more than fair," I said. "It's real." He hesitated at the door. "You really changed." I met his gaze. No, I stopped pretending. After he left, I sat in the quiet office and felt something unexpected. Relief. Because the hardest part of revenge isn't the strike. It's resisting the urge to become the thing you fought. The press cycle moved on as it always does. New scandals, new villains, new heroes. My name faded from headlines and settled into footnotes where real work lives. I welcomed it. Then came the call that forced me to confront the one thread I hadn't cut. My mother was being discharged. "She'll need care," the doctor said. "At home." I closed my eyes. "I'll arrange it." Evan watched me carefully that night as I made calls, hired professionals, signed agreements. "You don't owe her this," he said gently. "I know," I replied. "This isn't debt, it's choice." When my mother moved into a smaller place near the hospital, I visited once a week. We spoke politely, carefully, like two people learning a new language after years of shouting. One evening, she surprised me. "I was afraid of you," she said suddenly. I looked up. "Of me?" "Of how clearly you saw," she continued. "I thought if I acknowledged it, I'd have to change everything." I let the silence sit. "I don't need you to confess," I said. "I need you to stop rewriting." She nodded slowly. "I don't know how." "That's your work," I replied. At home, Evan proposed on a quiet Sunday morning, no audience, no performance. Just a simple question and a steady gaze. "Yes," I said without hesitation. We planned a small wedding. No spectacle, no hierarchy, no seating charts designed to signal importance. Just people who had shown up when it mattered. My grandmother walked me down the aisle. She squeezed my hand before letting go. "You did good," she whispered. I believed her. Lauren didn't attend. She sent a brief message instead. "I hope you're happy." This time I didn't reply. Happiness didn't need a defense anymore. The merger finalized 2 weeks later. On paper, it was a victory. In practice, it was a responsibility that would take years to honor. I welcomed that too. On the anniversary of the wedding that never happened, I drove past the estate where it all collapsed. The gates were closed, the hedges overgrown, a place designed for appearances now empty. I didn't feel triumph, I felt closure. That night, sitting beside Evan with the city humming beyond the windows, I realized something that surprised me. Revenge had been the spark, but purpose was the fire that lasted. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. The thing no one tells you about winning is how quiet it is afterward. Not peaceful, not joyful, just quiet, like the hum that remains when a storm moves on and leaves you standing in a landscape you barely recognize. I felt it most in the mornings when I woke before Evan and lay there listening to my own breathing, waiting for the old dread to arrive. It didn't. Instead, there was space. Space to remember things I had buried because survival didn't allow sentiment. Space to grieve not just what was done to me, but what I'd lost trying to endure it. The little rituals, the version of myself who once believed love could be earned through usefulness. That version didn't exist anymore. Work continued steady and demanding. The merged company found its footing not without friction. People tested me, some out of habit, some out of fear. I met all of it the same way I'd learned to handle my family, with clarity. When someone tried to speak over me in a meeting, I waited until they finished, and then calmly reclaimed the floor. When a senior executive questioned a decision because this isn't how it used to be done, I replied, "That's the point." Word traveled fast. She's fair, she listens, she doesn't flinch. Respect replaced resentment in places I hadn't expected. Not admiration, respect. The kind that doesn't require performance. Then one afternoon the past knocked again. My grandmother fell. The call came while I was reviewing quarterly projections, her voice replaced by a nurse's calm explanation. Broken hip. Surgery scheduled. Stable but fragile. The word fragile sat heavy in my chest. I drove to the hospital in silence, Evan's hand steady on my knee. When I reached her room, she looked impossibly small in the bed, white hair fanned across the pillow like a halo she'd never asked for. "Well," she said when she saw me. That was dramatic. I laughed, the sound breaking something tight in my chest. "You scared me." "Good," she replied. "Keeps you sharp." She squeezed my hand, her grip weaker but still intentional. "You know why this hurts more now, don't you?" I shook my head. "Because there's nothing left to distract you," she said gently. "No fight, no fire. Just truth." She recovered slowly, painfully. I visited every day listening as she told stories she'd never shared before, about her own marriage, about leaving with nothing but a suitcase and a spine she refused to bend, about the choices women make when the world gives them none that feel clean. "You think you're the first woman to burn a bridge to save herself?" she asked once. "No," I said, "but sometimes it feels lonely." She smiled. "Lonely is better than lost." One evening as I was leaving the hospital, I saw my mother sitting in the hallway. She hadn't told me she'd be there. She looked up slowly, eyes tired but alert. "She asked for me," she said. I nodded. She would. We stood there, two women bound by blood and history, neither sure what to say. Finally, my mother spoke. "I don't know how to be part of your life," she admitted, not without controlling it. I studied her face, searching for manipulation, finding only fear. "You don't have to be," I said. "You just have to be honest." She swallowed. "I don't know if I can." "That's your answer then," I replied softly. She nodded, accepting it in a way she never had before. "Lauren sent a message that week. 'I'm in therapy, not asking you to respond, just wanted you to know.'" I stared at the words longer than necessary. Then I typed back one sentence. "Take it seriously. Nothing more, nothing less." The wedding planning moved forward quietly. Evan and I chose a date that meant nothing to anyone but us. No holidays, no anniversaries, no ghosts, just a clean page. As the day approached, I felt something unfamiliar, anticipation without anxiety. The night before the ceremony, I stood alone in the living room, the dress hanging nearby, the city lights soft beyond the glass. I thought of the girl I'd been at that birthday dinner, smiling while disappearing. I wished I could reach back and tell her something simple. "You're not wrong, you're not invisible, you're early." When I joined Evan in bed, he wrapped an arm around me and whispered, "You're safe now." I believed him, because safety, I had learned, isn't about walls or titles or winning. It's about knowing you'll never abandon yourself again. And that was something no one could take from me. The morning of my wedding arrived without ceremony. No buzzing phone, no knot in my stomach, no voice in my head rehearsing apologies I didn't owe. Just light filtering through the curtains and the steady rhythm of a life that finally belonged to me. I woke before Evan and lay there for a moment, listening to the city breathe. Somewhere below, a truck shifted gears. A door closed. Someone laughed. Ordinary sounds. Sacred sounds. I realized then how long I had lived braced for impact, how unfamiliar it felt to wake without armor. When I stood, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because she was transformed, because she was unburdened. The ceremony was small, intentional. A garden borrowed from a friend, late afternoon light, slanting soft and forgiving. Folding chairs, simple flowers, no spectacle pretending to be love. Just people who had shown up when things were hard, who stayed when silence would have been easier. My grandmother sat in the front row, wrapped in a shawl, eyes bright. When she saw me, she smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't ask for anything in return. My mother wasn't there. Lauren wasn't either. And for the first time, the absence didn't feel like loss. It felt like alignment. As I walked toward Evan, I felt something settle in my chest, not nerves. Belonging. We exchanged vows, we wrote ourselves. No grand promises about forever, just commitments rooted in reality. Truth over comfort, respect over performance, love that doesn't require erasure. When we kissed, the applause was gentle, genuine. No cameras, no whispers, no one ranking moments by importance. Afterward, as the sun dipped low and conversations bloomed around us, my grandmother took my hand and pressed something into my palm. A folded piece of paper. Open it later, she said. I did that night after the last guest left, and the garden fell quiet. Evan asleep beside me, the day settling into memory. Inside was a single sentence written in her careful hand. You didn't just survive, you chose yourself. I cried then, not from pain, from release. Life didn't become perfect after that. It became honest. The company thrived slowly and steadily. Mistakes still happened. People still disappointed me. I disappointed myself sometimes. But the difference was this. I no longer confused endurance with virtue or silence with grace. I set boundaries without explanation. I trusted my instincts without apology. I stopped waiting for permission to take up space. My mother and I settled into something quiet and distant. Care without closeness. Responsibility without intimacy. It wasn't what stories sell, but it was real. Lauren sent occasional updates from the other side of the country. Neutral, polite, trying. I wished her well without reopening wounds that had finally scarred. On the anniversary of my grandmother's fall, we sat together in her kitchen again, tea steaming between us. You know, she said, people will always call this revenge. I smiled. Let them. She nodded. Revenge is loud. What you did was surgical. I thought of the birthday dinner. The cake. The glass raised to someone else's future while mine sat unacknowledged. I thought of how small I had learned to make myself to survive. And I thought of the woman I was now. Calm, clear, unafraid. It wasn't about punishing them, I said. It was about refusing to disappear. She reached for my hand. Exactly. That night I wrote something I never intended to publish, just for myself. A record, a reminder. If you are reading this and you feel invisible in your own family, in your own marriage, in your own workplace, hear me clearly. You are not too sensitive. You are not difficult. You are not imagining it. Sometimes the role they assign you is convenient, not true. And sometimes the most radical act of revenge is not destruction. It is departure. It is clarity. It is building a life where your worth is not negotiated. I closed the journal and set it aside. Outside, the city hummed, unimpressed, unbothered, moving forward the way it always does. I liked that. The world didn't owe me acknowledgement. I had already given it to myself. Evan stirred beside me and reached for my hand, half asleep. I squeezed back, grounding myself in the present. The house was quiet, clean. Not spotless, not perfect, but honest. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Truly. These stories live because they are shared, because somewhere someone is listening and realizing they are not alone. If this resonated with you, take a moment. Like it, comment, subscribe. Tell me where you recognized yourself. Tell me the moment you stopped shrinking. Tell me how you rebuilt. Because revenge fades, but dignity lasts. And once you reclaim it, no one ever gets to take it from you again.